A legendary city vanished completely beneath the Mediterranean Sea. For more than 1,000 years, the glorious port of Heracleion was nothing but a myth, a whispered name from ancient texts. It was the gateway to Egypt, a place of immense wealth and power, until it simply disappeared from the map and memory. By the end of this journey, you will witness how a modern-day quest pulled this sunken metropolis from the realm of fantasy into stunning reality. What mysterious force could make an entire city sink without a trace? And what forgotten treasures did the ocean floor keep hidden for centuries? What does the story of a lost civilization say about our own world today? The whispers of this sunken world were preserved not in stone, but in parchment. For centuries, the only proof that Heracleion had ever existed was found in the fragile pages of ancient texts. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a magnificent temple built on the orders of the pharaoh, a place where the legendary hero Heracles first set foot on Egyptian soil. It was from this mythical visit that the city earned its Greek name, Heracleion, a name that honored the son of Zeus, but the Egyptians knew it by another, older name, Thonis. This dual identity reveals the city's true purpose. Thonis Heracleion was the single, mandatory gateway to Egypt for all ships arriving from the Greek world. Picture a bustling, cosmopolitan port where every merchant vessel, every diplomat, every shipment of silver and timber was required to stop. Here, customs duties were collected for the pharaoh, turning the city into a vast treasury. Its significance went beyond mere commerce. It was a place of profound political power. Greek historians recorded that a journey to Thonis was essential for any new pharaoh seeking recognition and legitimacy from the rulers across the sea. The city's legendary status was even woven into the fabric of myth. It was said that before the Trojan War, the beautiful Helen and her abductor, Paris, sought refuge in Thonis, a fleeting visit by the world's most famous couple that added a layer of romantic tragedy to its history. This was not just a city, it was a colossal administrative center, a sacred site, and a legend. Its wealth was immense, its power absolute, and then the text simply stopped. The gateway to Egypt vanished, leaving behind only stories that would be doubted for 1,000 years. For more than a decade, one man was consumed by the ghost of a city. Franck Goddio, a French underwater archaeologist, refused to believe Heracleion was only a myth. While others saw empty ocean, he saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. Goddio dedicated years of his life to a single, monumental quest to find the lost gateway to Egypt. His search began not in the water, but in the library, meticulously cross-referencing ancient texts with forgotten maps. He was piecing together a theoretical location from fragments of history, a needle in a vast aquatic haystack, but theory alone would not raise a city from the deep. To turn legend into reality, he needed to see the unseeable. His team pioneered the use of advanced survey technology, deploying instruments that acted as underwater eyes. Side-scan sonar painted a detailed picture of the seabed's topography, revealing shapes and outlines hidden by sand and silt. Even more remarkable were the nuclear magnetic resonance magnetometers, devices so sensitive they could detect the faint magnetic anomalies caused by buried stone and metal, the ghostly signatures of a sunken civilization. The academic world watched with deep skepticism, dismissing the search as a fool's errand. But in the year 2000, in the murky waters of Abaukia Bay, the theory met its proof. The magnetometers began to sing, their readings spiking wildly. Divers descended into the gloom, their hands brushing not against rock, but against the carved stone of a colossal statue. The legends were true. Franck Goddio had not just found a few artifacts, he had found the city itself. A real-life Indiana Jones pulling an entire world back from the brink of oblivion. The discovery was only the very beginning of a far greater challenge. Heracleion did not rest on the open seabed but was buried deep, 6.5 kilometers from the modern Egyptian coastline in Abukir Bay. Here, the Mediterranean holds the city under 45 feet of water, a depth that sounds manageable until you experience the environment. The water is a thick, soupy murk with visibility often dropping to near zero. Powerful currents sweep across the site, threatening to dislodge equipment and bury fragile finds under shifting sands. The most deceptive element is the silt, a fine, soft sediment that has acted as both a destroyer and a perfect preserver for over 1,200 years. It swallowed massive stone blocks whole, concealing them from view, yet it also encased delicate objects in an oxygen-free environment, protecting them from the ravages of marine life and saltwater corrosion. Working in this alien landscape requires a methodical, almost surgical approach. The first task was not to grab treasures, but to understand the city's layout. Teams used photogrammetry, taking thousands of overlapping photographs from every angle. Computers then stitched these images together to create a precise, three-dimensional map of the entire site. For the archaeologists, this process is like suddenly being able to fly over a city they cannot even see with their own eyes. It reveals the ghostly outlines of temples, plazas, and fallen columns hidden beneath the silt. Excavation itself is a slow, deliberate dance. Divers cannot simply dig. They use airlifts, which are like underwater vacuum cleaners, to gently suction away the sediment. A single wrong move can blow a cloud of silt that takes hours to settle, obliterating all visibility and risking damage to unseen artifacts. Every object recovered, from a giant statue to a tiny gold earring, presents a new crisis. After centuries underwater, materials are incredibly fragile. A stone statue saturated with salt will crystallize and crack apart if left to dry in the air. Each find must undergo a meticulous conservation process that can take years, slowly desalinating the object in fresh water tanks to ensure it survives its return to our world. This is not treasure hunting, it is a race against time to save a civilization that has already been lost once. The murky waters of Abukir Bay offered the first tangible proof of the legend. Divers, their vision limited to the small circle of light from their headlamps, reached out and felt not the expected roughness of natural rock, but the smooth, carved surface of a colossal foot. Then a leg, then the towering form of a red granite statue emerging from the eternal night. This was not a solitary artifact, it was one of many, a gallery of giants resting on the seafloor. The sheer scale was incomprehensible, a 5-meter-tall depiction of a Ptolemaic king and a matching statue of an Egyptian queen, both lying where they had fallen over a millennium ago. But the true confirmation of the city's identity came with a different find, one that made every archaeologist's heart stop. It was the naos of the Nectanebos I, a shrine carved from a single, massive block of red granite. This was not merely a statue, it was a piece of a temple's soul, an object of such profound religious significance that its presence anchored the entire site to a specific time and ruler. Finding this naos was like discovering a signpost with the city's name still legible. As the teams carefully mapped the area, a greater picture began to form from the silt. They uncovered the ghosts of harbors with the remains of over 70 ancient ships nestled in the mud. They traced the outlines of a vast network of canals, waterways that had once functioned as the city's streets, connecting a sprawling urban center. This was the undeniable truth. They were not looking at a shipwreck or an isolated temple. They were floating above the intact topography of a sunken metropolis, a complete cityscape frozen in time on the seabed. Every gentle sweep of sand revealed another piece of the puzzle, a pottery shard, a gold coin, a fallen column, all whispering the same incredible story: Heracleion was real. Slowly, the silt gave up its most staggering secret. Looming from the darkness, a colossal red granite face emerged, its serene expression untouched by the centuries. This was the goddess of the Nile flood, the deity Hapy, a symbol of fertility and abundance. He lay beside a monumental Ptolemaic queen, both statues stretching over 5 meters long, true giants of the deep. The stone itself was a marvel, quarried and transported from distant Aswan, its surface polished to a smooth sheen that still felt slick under a gloved hand. The water had preserved their grandeur, leaving the intricate carvings of headdresses and ceremonial wigs in breathtaking detail. To stand beside them was to feel dwarfed not just by their physical scale, but by the sheer ambition of the civilization that created them. But the true story was not in their individual beauty, but in their partnership. Here was a powerful Egyptian god resting side by side with the statue of a Greek ruler. This was not an accident, it was a statement. Heracleion was a melting pot where two great cultures met and merged. The Ptolemaic dynasty, descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals, ruled Egypt but knew they had to honor its ancient traditions to maintain power. Placing a Greek-style queen alongside the quintessential Egyptian god of the Nile was a brilliant political and religious act, a public declaration of unity and shared prosperity. Yet, recovering these multi-ton titans was a feat of modern engineering that rivaled their original construction. How do you lift a stone giant that has weighed down into the silt for over 1,000 years? The process was agonizingly slow and delicate. First, divers had to carefully tunnel beneath the statues to weave strong lifting straps into place, a treacherous task in near-zero visibility. Then, a massive crane on a specialized barge would begin the ascent, hoisting the Colossus with painstaking slowness. The entire operation was a precarious ballet, a battle against the water's buoyancy and the ever-present risk that the ancient stone, weakened by its long immersion, could fracture under the strain. Each successful lift was a victory, a moment where a piece of the city's soul was gently coaxed back into the light. Among these monumental finds rested a slab of black granite that held the final, undeniable truth. This was the stele of Thonis Heracleion, and it was found in a state of preservation so perfect it seemed to have been carved yesterday. The silt had protected its surface, leaving the intricate hieroglyphs and crisp Greek letters as sharp as the day they were inscribed. This was no ordinary stone, it was a royal decree, a piece of legislation sent out by the pharaoh Nectanebo I, and its message was breathtakingly clear. The stele declared for all traders and sailors to see that all goods, every single shipment arriving from the Greek world, must enter Egypt through this one specific port city. It named the city in both of its languages, Thonis in the ancient Egyptian text and Heracleion in the Greek. After more than 1,000 years of mystery, this single stone slab provided the final, concrete link, proving that the legendary Heracleion and the administrative port of Thonis were one and the same place. The decree went even further, laying down the law of the land with precise economic detail. It stated that a tax of 10%, a tithe, was to be levied on all these imported goods. This was not revenue for the pharaoh's general treasury, however. This immense wealth, the silver and the timber and the luxury items, was to be dedicated directly to the construction and upkeep of the temple of the goddess Neith. This divine decree transformed the city from a simple customs checkpoint into a sacred economic engine, funneling the wealth of an entire trade route directly into the heart of its most important religious institution. The stele was the ultimate smoking gun, a legal document from the highest authority that spelled out the city's singular purpose and its legendary name. It was the key that finally unlocked the myth, turning whispered stories into documented, stone-carved history. At the heart of this sunken metropolis lay its spiritual engine, the Grand Temple of Amun-Jereb. This was not merely a building, it was the divine residence of a supreme god, a fusion of the Egyptian god Amun and a local deity, Jereb. The temple complex was the city's true center of gravity, a place where the pharaohs themselves came to receive their divine right to rule from the gods. Today, its ruins paint a ghostly blueprint on the seabed, a sprawling arrangement of massive stone pylons that once formed a monumental gateway, vast courtyards where thousands of worshippers could gather, and the innermost sanctuaries where only the high priests were permitted to enter. To walk through this submerged sacred space is to traverse the very axis of the ancient world's faith. The discoveries here went far beyond architecture, revealing a city pulsating with religious devotion. Divers recovered exquisite gold ritual vessels, their delicate shapes perfectly preserved in the silt. These were not decorative items, they were sacred tools used in ceremonies to honor the gods. Then came the ceremonial barges, long, elegant boats that once carried the statue of Amun-Jereb in grand water processions through the city's canals. Imagine the spectacle, a gleaming golden statue of the god paraded on a lavishly decorated barge, moving through waterways lined with cheering crowds, the air thick with incense and prayer. Scattered around the temple like a divine assembly were countless smaller statues of deities, a pantheon frozen in time. There was Osiris, god of the afterlife, his body bound in white linen, and Isis, the great mother, her protective wings outstretched. Each statue, each offering plate, each piece of ritual jewelry contributes to an undeniable portrait. Thonis Heracleion was more than a trade hub. It was a major pilgrimage site, a destination for faithful travelers from across the Mediterranean seeking blessings, miracles, and a connection to the divine. This was a city where commerce and faith were deeply intertwined, where the wealth that flowed into its ports was ultimately dedicated to glorifying the gods who, it was believed, protected its shores. The seabed itself speaks of a commerce so vast it is difficult to fathom. Scattered across the harbor floor, archaeologists uncovered a forest of over 700 ancient stone and lead anchors, all resting where they were dropped over 2,000 years ago. This is not a collection of random shipwrecks, it is the physical evidence of a port operating at maximum capacity, a constant, bustling turnover of vessels from across the known world. Each anchor represents a ship waiting for its turn at the docks, a merchant eager to pay the pharaoh's due. The shipwrecks themselves tell a story of evolving maritime technology, with hulls from different centuries and cultures lying side by side, a testament to the city's enduring role as the unshakable gateway to Egypt. This incredible traffic generated staggering wealth, a fact proven by the personal treasures lost and found. Divers have recovered delicate gold coins, their intricate designs still sharp, and heavy lead weights used by merchants to measure out precious metals on scales. These weights were the essential tools of daily trade, the ancient equivalent of a cash register, ensuring every transaction was fair and every tax was properly calculated. Heracleon's economic power was absolute, a monopoly enforced by royal decree. Every ship sailing from the Greek world was forced to stop here before proceeding up the Nile. In its warehouses, the bounty of Egypt was exchanged for the luxuries of the Mediterranean. Egyptian gold, priceless papyrus scrolls, and the life-sustaining grain that fed the Greek cities were loaded onto outgoing vessels. In return, the city took in vast quantities of silver from Greek mines, fine wines, and amphorae filled with rich olive oil. This constant, controlled exchange made Thonis Heracleion fabulously wealthy, a mercantile hub where the taxes collected did not just enrich a pharaoh, but as we have seen, funded the very temples that define the city's divine purpose. The anchors, the coins, the sunken ships, they are all pieces of a single story, the story of an economic engine that powered an empire and built a legend. But beyond the grand statues and royal decrees, the true soul of Heracleion lies in the intimate, personal objects left behind by its people. These are not the possessions of kings, but of ordinary citizens whose lives were suddenly frozen in time. Imagine a woman preparing for her day, looking into a polished bronze mirror, its surface still reflective after centuries underwater. Or a mother fastening a delicate gold bracelet around a child's wrist, its tiny clasp a marvel of ancient craftsmanship. Archaeologists have recovered these very items, intricately carved hairpins and rings, each one a whisper of individual taste and personal vanity. They even found children's toys, simple clay figures that were once clutched in small hands, reminding us that this was a city of families, not just a commercial or religious center. The rhythm of daily life was deeply intertwined with the divine. This connection is powerfully illustrated by the discovery of limestone sarcophagi, not for humans but for sacred animals. These beautifully carved stone coffins were designed to hold the mummified remains of creatures like the ibis and the baboon, animals believed to be physical manifestations of the gods Thoth and Babai. A family might keep such an animal, care for it, and upon its death participate in its mummification and burial. This was not a distant temple-only ritual, but a faith that permeated every household. So picture this sunken metropolis not as a silent ruin, but as a vibrant, noisy, and multicultural port. The air would have been thick with the smell of salt, spices, and baking bread. The canals were crowded with boats, their sailors shouting in a mix of Egyptian and Greek. Merchants haggled over prices in bustling markets, while priests in white linen robes moved through the crowds on their way to the temple. This was a city pulsing with life, a place where the grand themes of commerce and religion were lived out in the simple, human acts of getting dressed, playing with children, and honoring the gods in everyday ways. What would it have been like to walk those sunken streets, to be just another face in that forgotten crowd? The story of Heracleion is not a solitary one. Just 30 kilometers up the canopic branch of the Nile, another great port thrived, a city known as Naucratis. These two centers did not compete, but instead formed a perfectly balanced dual port system, a partnership that controlled the economic lifeblood of the region. Heracleion, with its royal decree and mandatory taxes, was the official state-controlled gateway. Every ship was required to stop, declare its cargo, and pay a tithe to the pharaoh and his gods. It was the formal, administrative face of Egypt to the Greek world. Naucratis, however, played a very different role. Founded as a designated trading post for Greek merchants, it was a vibrant, free-wheeling emporium. Here, Greek settlers lived and worked under their own customs, a semi-autonomous colony buzzing with the energy of free enterprise. While Heracleion was the mandatory first stop, Naucratis was the final destination for many Greek traders, a place where goods could be exchanged in a more familiar, open market. Think of it as a system of strict customs at the border, followed by a bustling free trade zone further inland. The fates of these two cities were locked together. For centuries, their success was symbiotic. The official trade funneled through Heracleion legitimized and supplied the bustling markets of Naucratis. The wealth generated in Naucratis, in turn, created a constant demand for the goods that had to pass through Heracleion's ports. They were two halves of a single economic engine. This deep connection is why the dry land excavations at Naucratis have been so crucial for understanding the sunken world of Heracleion. At Naucratis, archaeologists uncovered the workshops where Greek potters produced distinctive ceramics. Finding these exact same pottery styles among the ruins of Heracleion provided a powerful chronological link, like matching a fingerprint. The religious practices unearthed at Naucratis, with its Greek temples to gods like Apollo and Hera, helped explain the cultural fusion seen in Heracleion's own art. The two cities, one buried underwater and one under sand, speak to each other across the centuries. When one prospered, so did the other, and when one began to fail, it was a sign that the entire system was under threat. The sheer volume of money found on the seabed is staggering. Gold coins shimmer in the silt, their surfaces stamped with the faces of Ptolemaic rulers, while silver Greek drachmas bear the symbols of distant city-states. This was not a single, unified currency, but a bustling international marketplace where the wealth of two great civilizations mingled freely. Every coin tells a story of connection, a physical piece of evidence for the ships that sailed from Athens, Rhodes, and beyond, their captains carrying payment for Egyptian grain and papyrus. The presence of so much foreign coinage alongside Egyptian gold proves that Heracleion was not just a passive toll booth, but a vibrant financial hub where currencies were exchanged, values were negotiated, and the global economy of the ancient Mediterranean was made real. But coins alone could not regulate such a complex system. For that, the city relied on something far more fundamental: the lead weights discovered by the dozens. These are not glamorous artifacts, but their purpose was vital. Each weight was carefully cast and stamped, often bearing the name of the city, Thonis, or the image of a god like Osiris. This was the city's official seal of approval. In a world without digital scales, these standardized weights were the only guarantee of fairness. A merchant placing a weight on one side of a balance scale to measure out silver knew that every other merchant in the port was using an identical measure. This system prevented fraud and built the trust necessary for massive, high-value transactions. It was the ancient equivalent of a national bureau of standards, and its enforcement from this one port gave Heracleion immense economic authority. The entire trading network depended on this credibility. A Greek ship captain would not hand over a fortune in silver without the absolute confidence that the weights used to measure it were honest and official. By controlling the standards of measurement, Heracleion did not just collect taxes, it governed the very integrity of commerce, ensuring its role as the indispensable and trusted gateway to Egypt for centuries. Even in death, the city revealed its deep cultural divide. Lying on the outskirts of the sunken metropolis, archaeologists found a necropolis, a city of the dead resting silently on the seabed. Here, rows of limestone sarcophagi lay scattered, their heavy lids dislodged by the slow, relentless movement of the water over centuries. Some of these stone coffins still held the skeletal remains of the people who once called this vibrant port home. The burials tell two distinct stories side by side. Some follow the elaborate Egyptian tradition, with bodies carefully prepared for the afterlife, their organs removed and the remains wrapped, a process intended to preserve the soul for its eternal journey. In nearby sarcophagi, however, lie the remains of Greek inhabitants, buried in a much simpler style, their bodies placed in the coffin without mummification, accompanied perhaps by a single coin for the ferryman of the underworld. This stark contrast in funeral rites is profoundly telling. It was not just in life that Egyptians and Greeks maintained their separate identities and beliefs, but in death as well. The community was so diverse, so firmly established, that it contained entire parallel traditions for crossing into the afterlife. This sunken cemetery is a quiet, poignant reminder that Heracleion was not just a center of commerce and power. It was a place of families, of generations who lived, loved, and grieved here. Each skeleton is a silent testament to a human life that was part of this great experiment in cultural coexistence, a final, personal anchor to the world we are only just beginning to understand. The silent stone giants of Heracleion did not keep their secrets to themselves. Carved directly into the shoulders of colossal statues, along the bases of altars, and onto the very walls of the temple, a wealth of written words has survived the sea. Beyond the monumental stele of Thonis Heracleion, countless other inscriptions have been painstakingly translated, and together they form a chorus of voices from the deep. These are not just grand pronouncements from pharaohs, but the personal signatures of a living city. One inscription might name the priest who dedicated a statue, while another records the merchant who funded a new gateway, forever etching his gratitude into the stone for the gods to see. Each carved name, from a high official to a humble trader, is a thread in the social fabric of the city, pulling individuals out of the anonymous past and back into the light. How many lives are recorded here, waiting for us to read their stories? These texts are far more than simple labels. They provide intricate details of religious ceremonies that were once performed in the Grand Temple, describing the specific offerings to be made to Amun-Jereb and the precise hymns to be sung by the priests. They record historical events like the visit of a foreign dignitary or the completion of a major building project, giving us a chronological anchor for the city's timeline. Translating these inscriptions is a monumental task of its own. Epigraphers, the specialists who study ancient writing, work from high-resolution photographs taken underwater, carefully tracing each faded hieroglyph and Greek letter. It is a process like piecing together a giant, scattered jigsaw puzzle where most of the pieces are still missing. A single fragment of text on a broken pottery shard might reveal the price of wine, while a ceremonial plaque could recount an entire royal decree. Every translated word adds another piece to the puzzle, slowly reconstructing the laws, the economy, and the daily rhythms of this sunken world. The most profound revelations often come from the most mundane objects. A simple stone weight used in the market might be stamped with the name of the city's chief overseer, a man otherwise lost to history. A gold ring bears the name of its owner, a woman whose story we can only imagine. These everyday items, marked with writing, give voices to the long, silent city. They transform Heracleion from a collection of beautiful ruins into a community of people with jobs, faiths, and identities. We learn not just how they built their monuments, but how they lived their lives, conducted their business, and expressed their devotion. Each inscription is a direct message from the past, a whisper across the centuries that tells us this was not just a place, but a home. For all its grandeur and wealth, the bedrock of Heracleion was fatally unstable. The city was constructed on the shifting ground of the Nile Delta, a foundation of soft clay and loose silt deposited over millennia by the great river. This ground was not solid earth, but a waterlogged sponge, inherently vulnerable and waiting for a catalyst. That catalyst arrived with immense force. The leading scientific theory points to a devastating geological one-two punch that sealed the city's fate around the 8th century AD. First, a massive earthquake, or more likely a series of them, struck the region. The seismic tremors did not just shake the buildings, they violently agitated the very ground upon which the city stood. The shock waves forced the water trapped between the countless particles of silt and clay to the surface. In a terrifyingly rapid transformation, the pressurized, saturated soil lost all its structural strength. It underwent a process known as liquefaction, where solid ground instantly behaves like a liquid. Imagine the entire foundation of the city turning into a thick quicksand-like soup. The heavy stone temples, the colossal statues, the very paving stones of the plazas no longer had anything solid to rest upon. They began to sink, pulled down by their own immense weight into the morass. This catastrophic sinking was likely amplified by other environmental pressures. A gradual rise in sea level over the preceding centuries had already raised the water table, making the ground even more unstable. Some evidence suggests the initial earthquake may have also triggered a tsunami, a colossal wave that would have smashed into the already foundering city, scouring away upper levels and finishing the job the liquefaction had started. This was not a slow, graceful submersion over centuries. The archaeological evidence points to a relatively short, violent, and terrifyingly final catastrophe. The city did not gradually flood, it was swallowed. In a matter of moments or perhaps hours, the gateway to Egypt vanished beneath the waves, leaving only legends and a ghostly silence on the seafloor for over 1,000 years. Raising a statue from the seabed is only the first and perhaps the easiest step in a much longer rescue mission. The moment these artifacts leave the protective embrace of the silt and saltwater, a new and invisible race against time begins. For over 1,000 years, the sea has saturated every microscopic pore of the stone, every fiber of the wood with crystallized salt. This salt is a silent killer. If an object is simply allowed to dry in the open air, the salt within it crystallizes, expanding with tremendous force. A 5-meter granite statue can literally tear itself apart from the inside, cracking and crumbling into dust before our eyes. It is a heartbreaking paradox where saving an artifact from the ocean can mean destroying it forever. The solution is a process as slow and deliberate as the excavation itself, a scientific ritual known as desalination. Every recovered object, from the smallest coin to the largest colossus, is immediately submerged in fresh water tanks. Here, they will remain for months or more often for years as the salt is patiently coaxed out. The water is changed regularly, sometimes weekly, slowly reducing the salt concentration in a controlled mimicry of natural drying. For fragile organic materials like wood, the process is even more complex. A ship's hull or a delicate ceremonial tool must be treated with water-soluble waxes or modern synthetic resins like PG, polyethylene glycol. These chemicals gradually replace the water within the wood's cellular structure, providing a permanent internal scaffold that prevents the artifact from collapsing into a shapeless pulp once it is finally air-dried. This is a battle fought in laboratory tanks, a war against chemistry and decay where victory is measured in decades of painstaking care. Yet the threats are not only scientific. The very location of the site makes it vulnerable. Modern pollution from the nearby Nile and port activities creates a corrosive environment, accelerating decay. And the priceless treasures lying in plain sight on the seabed are a constant temptation for looters, who with modern technology can strip a historical layer bare in a single night. Each season of excavation is a delicate balance, a race to document, recover, and conserve as much as possible before the sea or human hands claim these treasures for a second and final time. The true legacy of Heracleion now depends on this fragile, ongoing rescue. This religious fusion was carved in stone for all to see. The supreme god of Heracleion was Ammon-Jereb, a powerful combination of the Egyptian state god Ammon and a local canine deity. To the Greek merchants and sailors arriving in the port, this powerful god was not a foreign mystery. They recognized him immediately as their own king of the gods, Zeus. An inscription found in the city makes this equation explicit, declaring that Ammon was in fact Zeus himself. This was not a case of one god replacing another, but a brilliant theological bridge. A Greek could pray to Zeus Ammon using a hybrid name and feel they were honoring the same divine power as their Egyptian neighbors. This shared worship created a common ground, a spiritual language that facilitated trade and diplomacy in a city built on cultural exchange. But there was another, darker deity whose presence loomed even larger in the city's religious life. The god Osiris, lord of the underworld and symbol of death and resurrection, was central to Heracleon's identity. The Greek historian Herodotus traveled to Egypt and wrote about the mysterious rites of Osiris, though he claimed he was forbidden from revealing their deepest secrets. He described a nighttime ceremony of great passion and mourning, a ritual that we now know likely reached its climax right here in the canals of this sunken city. The archaeological evidence for these legendary mysteries is stunning. Divers have recovered the remains of ceremonial barges, long, elegant boats that were not used for trade or war. These sacred vessels were designed for one purpose: to carry the effigy of Osiris in a grand, watery procession through the city's canals. Imagine the spectacle under the torchlight. Priests in white linen robes would place a gilded statue of the god onto a lavishly decorated barge. As the boat glided through the dark waterways, crowds of worshippers lining the banks would wail and beat their chests in a symbolic reenactment of the search for the murdered god's body. The procession would culminate in a secret ceremony, perhaps within the temple precinct, celebrating his rebirth and the promise of eternal life. The seabed has yielded the very tools of this faith. Archaeologists have found delicate faience chalices and ritual bowls, their surfaces glazed a brilliant blue-green, which were likely used to hold offerings during these sacred dramas. They uncovered tiny gold models of the ceremonial barks, precious votive gifts left by the faithful to ensure their own safe passage into the afterlife. This convergence of belief made Heracleion far more than a customs station. It was a crucial pilgrimage site, a place where the profound mysteries of Egyptian religion were accessible to the Greek world. A merchant from Athens could pay his taxes at the dock, then witness a ritual so powerful its details were guarded by silence, a spiritual experience that connected him directly to the cycle of death and rebirth. In the submerged ruins of Heracleion, we do not find two separate religions existing side by side. We find a single, blended faith where gods shared names and rituals merged, creating a unique spiritual identity that could only have flourished in a place where two great civilizations met on the water's edge. The true genius of Heracleion is not found in its temples alone, but in the waterlogged bones of its harbor. This was not a simple dock, but a sprawling, interconnected complex of basins and canals engineered to tame the Mediterranean itself. A central protected harbor basin was carved out to shelter the massive seafaring vessels that arrived from Greece. From this main hub, a network of wider canals branched out like arteries, channeling smaller ships and barges deep into the city's commercial and religious districts. Along these waterways, massive stone quays were constructed from colossal limestone blocks, some weighing over 10 tons each. These were the loading docks of the ancient world, where the wealth of nations was physically transferred from ship to shore. The scale of the stonework is staggering, a testament to a city that was built to last for the ages. But the engineers faced a constant, relentless enemy, the silt of the Nile. The river deposited millions of tons of sediment into the delta each year, threatening to choke the very channels that gave the city life. To combat this, archaeologists believe the port employed a sophisticated and likely continuous maintenance system. Dredging boats, possibly manned by crews of laborers, would have worked to clear the vital waterways, ensuring that the deep-draft merchant ships never found themselves stranded on a newly formed sandbank. This ongoing battle against nature reveals a profound understanding of hydrology and maritime logistics. Every stone block, every carefully dredged canal, was part of a grand design focused on a single purpose: efficiency. This port was a machine for generating wealth, a perfectly tuned instrument that made Thonis Heracleion the undisputed master of Mediterranean trade for centuries. Heracleion was not the only city to vanish beneath the waves. Just a few kilometers away, lying in the same murky bay, its sister city shared the same fate. This was Canopus, a place celebrated not as a center of rigid bureaucracy, but as a legendary destination for pleasure and divine spectacle. Franck Goddio's team discovered this second sunken metropolis, revealing a twin pillar of the lost Egyptian coast. Where Heracleion was the mandatory gateway of commerce and official power, Canopus served a very different purpose. It was the vibrant heart of religious festivals and a city renowned for its temples and its more earthly delights. Ancient texts describe it as a place where Egyptians and Greeks mingled in celebration, drawn by the magnificent temple of the god Serapis. This hybrid deity, created during the Ptolemaic period, combined Egyptian and Greek traits into a single figure of worship, perfectly suited for a city built on cultural fusion. The discovery of Canopus completed the picture of a thriving, interconnected district, a dual metropolis where one city handled the business of empire while the other tended to the spirit and the senses. The finds from Canopus were strikingly unique. Among the most telling were the nilometers, a network of stone structures and staircases leading down into the water. These were not decorative fountains, but precision instruments of survival. The ancient Egyptians depended entirely on the annual flood of the Nile. A flood that was too weak meant famine and drought, while one that was too violent could bring catastrophic destruction. The priests of Canopus used these calibrated stone channels to measure the river's rising waters with meticulous accuracy. By tracking the height of the flood against the carved markings, they could predict the coming harvest's bounty, allowing the pharaoh's administration to plan taxes and grain storage for the entire region. This was science in service of the state and the gods, a vital function that made the city a crucial administrative hub in its own right. Imagine the scene during the flood season. Priests would descend the Nilometer's steps, their eyes fixed on the rising water, while the city around them buzzed with anticipation. the data they collected here would ripple out across Egypt, influencing economic decisions that affected millions. Finding these instruments in Canopus, a city known for its festivities, reveals a profound duality. This was a place that mastered the practical science of the Nile's life-giving waters, while also hosting the ecstatic festivals that thanked the gods for that very gift. It was a city that understood the deep connection between measurement and miracle, between the precise height of the river and the joyous celebrations its bounty would bring. Together, Heracleion and Canopus formed a complete world, one managing the flow of goods, the other interpreting the flow of the divine. While the colossal statues speak of imperial power, the true luxury of Heracleion is often found in the smallest of details. Tucked away in the silt, divers have recovered objects of breathtaking personal artistry, items that were touched, worn, and cherished by the people who called this city home. Exquisite gold jewelry appears, seemingly untouched by time. Delicate earrings with intricate granulation work, rings set with precious stones, and heavy gold bracelets inlaid with vibrant colored glass speak of a society that valued fine craftsmanship and personal adornment. One standout piece is a stunning Ptolemaic-era gold bowl, its surface hammered to a perfect sheen and decorated with a repeating pattern of floral motifs. To hold such an object was to display not just wealth but a refined aesthetic taste, a connection to the Hellenistic styles that influenced the entire Mediterranean. Alongside these golden treasures lies another material, one the ancient Egyptians held in almost equal esteem: faience. This was not simple pottery, but a sophisticated glazed ceramic, fired to a brilliant, jewel-like luster in shades of turquoise, cobalt blue, and white. From this material, countless shabti figurines were crafted. These were not mere decorations, they were servants for the afterlife. Each small, mummiform figure was inscribed with a spell, its purpose to magically come to life in the next world and perform manual labor on behalf of its deceased owner. A single individual might be buried with hundreds of these tiny servants, an entire workforce to ensure eternal comfort. The sheer number found in Heracleion reveals a deeply ingrained belief in the afterlife that crossed cultural lines. Then there are the polished ceremonial utensils made of bronze and silver. A long-handled ladle, its bowl worn smooth from use, might have been employed to pour libations to the gods during a family ritual. A beautifully carved cosmetic spoon, shaped like a swimming girl holding a duck, hints at the daily routines of grooming and beauty. These are the objects of lived experience. A gold bracelet is not just an artifact, it is a gift given, a status symbol displayed, a personal belonging lost in a moment of catastrophe. The gleam of a faience shabti is the light of a very human hope, a belief that even in death the community of Heracleion would endure. These small finds collectively whisper a more intimate truth than any monument can. They tell us that within this grand hub of commerce and empire, people lived lives of beauty, faith, and very personal luxury. The seabed at Heracleion holds a ghost fleet of unparalleled scale. Scattered across the harbor mud and within the silt-choked canals, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of more than 70 ancient ships, the largest collection of vessels from this era ever discovered in a single location. This is not a random assortment of wrecks, but a bustling port frozen at its absolute peak, a moment of vibrant life instantly transformed into a maritime graveyard. The variety of these ships is a testament to the city's international character. Here, sturdy Egyptian cargo ships known as baris rested beside sleek, fast Greek trading vessels. The baris was the workhorse of the Nile and its delta, a flat-bottomed boat perfectly adapted for navigating shallow waters. Herodotus himself described these unique ships, marveling at their construction from short planks fastened with long, internal ribs, a method that gave them immense strength for carrying heavy cargo like stone and grain. To find these vessels exactly as the historian described validates ancient accounts in a way few discoveries ever have. Alongside them, the Greek ships tell a different story, with their deeper hulls and elegant lines designed for the open, often treacherous waters of the Mediterranean. Their presence here in such numbers is physical proof of the relentless trade that defined this gateway city. The study of this sunken armada has completely rewritten our understanding of ancient shipbuilding. Before Heracleion, much of what we knew came from paintings or fragmentary remains. Here, the silt provided a perfect seal, preserving entire hulls, steering oars, and even rigging elements. We can now see, for the first time, how Egyptian and Greek naval architects solved the same problems in completely different ways. We can trace the evolution of the hull, the precise joinery of the planks, and the ingenious methods used to make these wooden shells withstand the power of the sea. This is not just a collection of old boats, it is a library of naval engineering. The most chilling revelation, however, lies in their shared fate. These 70-plus ships did not sink one by one over centuries. They were all destroyed simultaneously. Their wreckage is not scattered but clustered, as if a bustling Tuesday morning was abruptly captured and submerged. Many of the ships were found still loaded with their final cargoes, stone blocks from the Aswan quarries, amphorae filled with wine and oil, their holds full and their voyages suddenly, violently cut short. This mass destruction provides a stark and undeniable timestamp for the city's catastrophic end. It paints a picture of a single, horrifying event, a cataclysm so swift and powerful that an entire fleet, the very lifeblood of the city, was caught, trapped, and sent to the bottom together, locking the final moments of Heracleion in a watery tomb for over a millennium. The silent ruins of Heracleion are now speaking a new language, translated by the most advanced scientific tools ever deployed on an archaeological site. Beyond the initial discovery, a suite of modern technologies is allowing us to understand this sunken world in ways the original divers could never have dreamed. Take the process of photogrammetry, where thousands of overlapping photographs are stitched together by powerful computers to build a perfect three-dimensional digital twin of the entire city. This virtual model is more than a map, it is a time machine. Researchers can digitally peel back layers of silt, reconstruct fallen columns to their original positions, and even simulate how sunlight would have fallen through the temple gateways at dawn. This allows for non-invasive exploration, letting archaeologists plan their next dive with surgical precision and study the spatial relationships between buildings without ever disturbing the fragile site. The science continues once an artifact is safely in the lab. Isotopic analysis is like a passport stamped on every piece of stone and metal. By studying the unique chemical fingerprint of the granite in a statue, scientists can trace it back to the specific quarry in Aswan where it was carved, revealing ancient trade routes with incredible accuracy. The same technique applied to a silver coin can identify the mine in Greece from which its ore was extracted, mapping the flow of ancient capital across the Mediterranean. Even the most fragile organic remains have stories to tell. DNA testing on the bones found in the necropolis can reveal the genetic origins of the population, showing us the actual biological footprint of that Greek and Egyptian cultural fusion. Was a person buried in the Egyptian style actually of Greek descent? The answer lies in their very bones. Perhaps the most profound application of technology is in the study of the city's final moments. Core samples taken from the seabed act as a geological diary, recording centuries of seismic activity. By analyzing the layers of sediment, geologists can identify the precise moment of liquefaction, the violent upheaval that turned solid ground to soup. They can even detect evidence of a subsequent tsunami, a killer wave that may have delivered the final, crushing blow to the already sinking metropolis. This partnership between archaeology and hard science transforms speculation into data. We are no longer just guessing how Heracleion fell. We are reading the physical evidence it left behind, a criminal investigation into a disaster that occurred 1,200 years ago. Each technological advance peels back another layer of the mystery. proving that the true treasure of Heracleion is not the gold or the statues, but the boundless information still waiting to be decoded from the deep. The silent stones of Heracleion have done more than just confirm a legend. They have fundamentally rewritten the history of the ancient Mediterranean. For centuries, the dynamic between Egypt and Greece was often portrayed as one of distant admiration, with Greek philosophers and travelers looking upon an older, mysterious civilization. The discovery of this sunken port shatters that simplistic view. Heracleion proves the relationship was not one of distant observation, but of deep, direct, and daily integration. This was not a tentative cultural handshake, it was a full economic and spiritual embrace. The city acts as a tangible bridge, connecting the world of the pharaohs to the city-states of Greece in a way that dusty scrolls alone could never illustrate. It confirms that the gateway to Egypt was in fact a bustling Greek-speaking port, and that the wealth of the Nile flowed through a channel built on mutual need and shared ritual. Historians can no longer speak of these two great powers in isolation. The evidence from the seabed forces us to see their histories as permanently intertwined. The very real, physical presence of Heracleion validates historical accounts that were long dismissed as fanciful travelers' tales. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of the city's grandeur and its unique customs, and for generations, scholars debated how much of his account was fact versus fiction. The recovery of the ceremonial barges he described, the grand temple complex, and the sheer scale of the port's infrastructure have transformed his writings from speculative literature into verified historical documentation. He was not just telling stories, he was reporting on a real, functioning world. This validation extends beyond a single historian. The entire mythological framework surrounding the city, from its founding by Heracles to the visit of Helen of Troy, now carries the weight of a deeper, symbolic truth. These stories were the way ancient people encoded the significance of a place that was central to their shared identity. The city's dual name, Thonis to the Egyptians and Heracleion to the Greeks, is no longer just a linguistic curiosity. It is the perfect symbol of a dual identity that powered an age of exchange. This was the pivotal period when the foundational elements of Western civilization were being forged in the fires of cultural contact. The philosophical ideas, artistic styles, and political models that would shape Greece and later Rome did not develop in a vacuum. They were influenced directly and profoundly by the advanced knowledge and immense wealth of Egypt funneled through ports like Heracleion. The city stands as a monumental testament to a forgotten truth that our civilization was built not by separate cultures, but by a connected world, a world we are only now, after 1,200 years, beginning to properly see. The staggering truth is that we have only just begun to scratch the surface of this sunken world. After decades of work, a mere 5% of Heracleion has been carefully excavated from its muddy tomb. The city sprawls across more than 100 square kilometers of seabed, a vast territory that still holds its greatest secrets. What monumental discoveries are still waiting in the darkness? The royal palaces, the residences of the governors and pharaohs who walked these streets, remain completely lost. Their opulent halls and treasure rooms could still be intact, buried under layers of protective silt. Could there be more temples dedicated to unknown gods, or perhaps a grand library holding papyrus scrolls that have miraculously survived, their inked texts preserving lost works of literature or precise historical accounts? Every new season of diving carries the potential for a find that could rewrite our understanding of the ancient world once again. The future of this site is as exciting as its past. The international team, led by the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, continues its meticulous work, planning new campaigns that will target the city's elusive civic center and its residential districts. They are not just digging for treasure, they are piecing together the full map of a lost society. One of the most ambitious proposals for Heracleion's future is the creation of a submerged archaeological park, an underwater museum that would allow visitors to witness the city exactly as it rests on the seabed. Imagine floating over the grand temple of Amun-Jereb, seeing the fallen columns and statues in their original context, a ghostly metropolis preserved in its watery grave for all to experience. This vision would protect the site from looters and the elements while sharing its profound magic with the world. The story of Heracleion is far from over. With 95% of the city still unexplored, its deepest mysteries and most profound truths are still waiting for the next sweep of a diver's hand to reveal them. From a whispered legend to a mapped reality on the seafloor, the story of Heracleion is a journey like no other. We have witnessed the emergence of its colossal stone guardians, the goddess Hapy and the Ptolemaic queen, rising from the murk after 12 centuries. We have read the city's own name, carved into the black granite of the stele of Thonis Heracleion, the final piece of proof that silenced all doubt. We have walked through its ghostly temple of Amun-Jereb and seen the sunken fleet of 70 ships, a harbor frozen in its final catastrophic moment. And we have learned the tragic story of its demise, a victim of the very ground it was built upon, liquefied by an earthquake and swallowed by the sea. This city stands as a humbling testament to nature's overwhelming power and the profound fragility of human ambition. No civilization, no matter how wealthy or powerful, is immune to the forces of the earth. So, as this chapter closes, we turn to you. Which artifact from the deep speaks to your imagination the most? Is it the face of the 5-meter-tall queen, the sacred Nile shrine, or perhaps a simple gold bracelet lost by its owner in a moment of panic? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to join us on the next journey into history's greatest mysteries, be sure to subscribe.